And these are the Crimp Pliers that we ordered. And I'll put a link to these on the show information. They seem quite substantially made. I mean, these were relatively expensive. I mean, they weren't expensive compared with what Crimp Pliers actually cost when they're manufactured by Molex or somebody like that. But I think they were still relatively expensive. I think they were about £30 these, which is not exactly cheap compared with stuff you buy from China, is it? So we need to see if these are going to work, don't we? That's the proof of the pudding. Do they work? Well, actually, it says made in Japan rather than China. So yeah, apologies there. They're not Chinese. They're Japanese. Yep, it says here engineering incorporated, made in Japan. They're a precise universal crimp tool, and it says it does wire sizes AWG, which I think is American wire gauge, 28 to 18. So it does come with relatively good instructions here. It's kind of telling you how to make a good crimp and what to look for. I've got a few different types of terminals here that I think really should be some form of crimp terminal. I've got these spade connector terminals. I don't know what they're for, what they came off. They look a bit like some kind of automotive header. We've got some miniature Molex terminals, which is probably the size and type that I'm more used to. They're tiny. What else have we got here? Well, we've got the ones that actually fit the housing that we're going to use to make up the connector for the logic analyzer, so we want to have a go with them. So let's give these a try. Oh, just finally, what else have I got? Got some pin connectors here again. These are just something that I've salvaged from, well, I don't even know where these have come from actually. I must have had them in the box years. Again, some form of pin header. Yeah, I don't know what they are. You know, you keep older things, don't you, just in case you need them. Right, so we've got a few different types of crimp terminals there. Let's see if these pliers will do the job. Well, I think I said earlier, it is generally quite important that you use the correct wire size. A crimp is designed to fit a certain range of wire sizes. It can only compress itself so much. And these wire sizes that we're using on the logic analyzer, they're really a bit too small. Okay, so we'll start off by just doing a test crimp of the Molex connectors that we're going to use for our logic analyzer header. Now, I think the problem we'll find is that these crimp terminals are actually far too large for the wire that we're actually trying to fit in there, but we'll give it a go. Well, this is the first crimp terminal we're going to try, and this is the same size as the one that we used in the header connector for the logic analyzer, and it seems to fit best in the 2.3mm range. I'm not exactly sure what size this connector is, but this is the one it seems to fit in on the pliers. So we'll give that a go first, and I assume we just put it in and we squeeze it. So let's see how that works. And hopefully you saw that it basically just rolled over the sides of the connector and squashed them down. And can we squeeze that a little bit tighter? The only problem that I do foresee is that I suspect when we squeeze these as tight as they actually want to go, I think it's quite likely that it's going to end up cutting the wire, because the wires are so thin. The wires that I'm trying to get into this connector are basically too small. I'm really wondering whether or not I should try and assemble these crimp tools with some heat shrink around the insulation on the cable just to make it a little bit fatter. I think we'll give it a try without. So I said earlier, these are just some kind of cable headers that I had lying around. You can buy them on eBay from China. They're often supplied with these USB style logic analyzers, but I'm just going to use these because these ends fit the grabber probes, and I didn't show you that last time, did I? So I'll show you that now. So hopefully the camera will focus okay on this. This is a typical grabber probe, and it is one of the better quality ones that you can buy. And basically these wiring connectors just plug onto the back of them like that. So then we're going to connect the other end to our logic analyzer. So we're going to crimp on one of these Molex headers. So that's the plan. So these cables have got two ends that we can actually go at, and well, one end we don't need, so I'm just going to cut it off. And I'm going to leave a little bit of length of wire, I think, left on here, because these connectors might be useful for doing something else with. So we'll maybe just leave enough left on this end, just so we can use them for something. And the other thing is, we perhaps don't want to make these connections too long anyway, because it just makes them more susceptible to picking up noise and crosstalk. So we'll cut that off. Now the first one that I actually made up of these, I left it assembled like this, which made it harder to crimp. But then I found out when I actually plugged it into the analyzer, there was actually quite a lot of crosstalk between one cable and another anyway. So to actually eliminate that crosstalk, I ended up separating them. So I'm just going to separate them all now, because we're going to end up doing it later anyway. So these are the Y strippers that I use, and these are made by a company called Pressmaster. I think it's got Embler on them, and I'm sure I bought these from Farnell or RS, and I think that they're really about time to get new stripping jaws in them, because as I understand it, you can buy replaceable jaws that fit inside here and actually do the Y stripping. Well, I've probably had these 5 years, maybe even longer, and I would actually recommend them. They're very good. You know, an actual pair of automatic strippers that work reliably. They're you know, they're like hen's teeth. It's an unusual thing to get something that works well, and these Y strippers do work very well. But I have to admit, I seem to remember they were again ridiculously expensive. You know, sit down sit down before asking the price, and if you have to ask the price, you probably can't afford them. But I'm sure if you've got a lot of work to do, or you work professional electronics, these things are a godsend. You don't absolutely need them, but usually I like to use them for jobs like this, where, you know, if I start cutting too much wire off here and I have all the wires different lengths because I've made a mistake cutting the insulation, it'll kind of spoil the effect. So they are actually quite accurate at, you know, cutting exactly as much insulation off as you need, and they do tend usually not to damage the wire. I think these may damage it slightly because the blades are getting a bit old and blunt on them, which is probably not the best. And they also have a little bit of adjustment here that you just have to adjust, which is basically, I think, just sets how deeply the jaws bite into the wire before they start stripping. I wonder if I can show you the stripping action. So what they actually do is they grab the wire and then they pull back, and then the automatic release. I'll bring you in for that, because it's quite a nice thing to see, isn't it? Let's see if we can get you in to see that. Did you see that? And they've got a pair of cutters there. Let's have another go. Yeah, make a really nice job them, don't they? But I think this wire might be a bit small for them, but let's give it a go. And I'm going to actually cut quite a lot of insulation off here, because my idea is, because these crimp wires are so thin, they've got so little copper in them, I'm going to fold them over to try and just create a bit more contact area for the crimp. So I'll just going to slide this plastic stop further back. This sets the depth of how much insulation you remove. So I've actually set that back. It looks like I'm going to be removing just under 1 centimetre maybe, which is quite a lot. They might struggle to do this, but we'll have a go. Bang, done. So that's great. I mean, hopefully I'll just be able to bang through these really quickly. There's another. Oh, you see, that one did get it wrong. Let's have another bash. And once it's done it wrong once, it'll tend to keep getting it wrong annoyingly. Yeah, okay. Fail. So now I'm going to have to go back to the normal ones. and they work as well, obviously. But when these automatic ones do work, they work wonderfully. I'll just try and adjust the blades a bit more. They are, unfortunately, just worn out because they need new blades, but when they work, they're brilliant. I mean, obviously you don't have to use automated strippers, but they do to some extent take the worry out of it. I don't know if you're like me, when you use this type of stripper, if you're not very careful, you end up using the wrong jaw and cutting some of the copper away with it, and that's always annoying. Or you don't get them quite lined up with the jaws and you cut them and it just cuts the wire in half. Nothing wrong with it using these. I suppose it's like any tool, you get used to it, but I do prefer the automatic ones. I think these are great. Okay, great. And what I probably didn't really explain very well, I think what I appreciate about using these is it's the consistency. So every one of these wires is going to be stripped exactly the same amount of insulation removed, and there's just no damage to the inner copper, and that's what you want. Now, just looking at these wires that we've stripped, it's not particularly beautiful bright copper. It almost looks as though they've come pre-tarnished from the factory. I'm assuming it is copper cable. I don't know. I bet it is. I think this cable is too light for them to be bothered to scrimp and use aluminium or steel. So I'm going to guess it is copper. But yeah, it just looks a bit tarnished. It doesn't look like very good copper, as though maybe the insulation material isn't very good and air's leaking into it, because they're not particularly old, these cables. I think I only bought them last year or something, so I'd expect this to be lovely bright copper, but it isn't. It's kind of quite a dark browny red material, so I wonder if that's oxidization. I can only assume that it is. Well, forget everything I just said. It looks like this cabling isn't copper. It's copper coated steel because it's magnetic. It's actually very magnetic. Yeah, I really wasn't expecting that. I wouldn't have thought for something with so little copper in it, the Chinese wouldn't have bothered scrimping, and they would have just used a copper cable, because there's a tiny amount of copper in here anyway. It's only thin wire. So I think what that really says to me is that we're not going to get particularly long life out of these things. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing, that, isn't it? But what we've got to work with. So I guess that's what we've got. I don't really know how to protect against that. I don't know what to suggest. Is that one the same? Yeah, that one feels magnetic as well. Because obviously when you buy from eBay, you don't know what you're getting. I'm sure they all say high quality on them. I mean, I bought these ages ago, so I can't remember exactly who I bought them from. But I'm sure that they would have said on them, they said best high quality copper and all that lot, because they always do say that. They never tell you they're going to sell you copper coated steel, do they? But yeah, that's interesting. So, beware. Who would have known? Right, but what we've got, so c'est la vie. So what I'm going to do is, just to try and create a little bit more contact area, I'm just going to fold them over. And don't worry, I won't make you watch crimping all these, because that'll get boring, won't it? Probably doesn't make for great television, this, does it? So sorry about that. So I think we've got to put the wire in, and we've got to put it in enough. I don't know how much you can see, probably not very much. I'm afraid that I can't really get into a position where you can see and I can see. So I've just crimped the back part now, so I'll see if I can show you that. So I've just crimped the part of the connector there where it grabs the insulation, but I haven't crimped the front part, and it does look as though it is cutting into the insulation a little bit, because these wires are, quite feeble compared with the the heavy metal of the crimp. So the crimp itself is cutting into the insulation. And I suspect if you're a bit heavy-handed, that the crimp terminal would actually just cut through the wires inside, just cut the wire. But yeah, I'm not necessarily blaming the crimp for that. What I was trying to say earlier is that this wire I'm using is far too thin for this crimp, but I do need to use it because this is the style of crimp that will fit into the header that I'm using. And I don't think you can actually get this crimp style of terminal that fits a smaller wire. It's kind of fixed on the current rating for the wire, and this is a 12 amp connector, so it is going to be quite a large crimp physically. So I'm just going to squash down now the wire connection part of the crimp. I'm afraid you won't really be able to see anything, but you'll see the jaws close together. So I just squeeze that and they close up. The actual high quality ones have got a ratchet arrangement, so basically they automatically kind of open themselves again, or basically they at least click so that you know that the crimp has finished, it's moved to its final position. These, you've just got to get a feel for it, but that's okay, they work fine. So we've got that, it works okay. What I might be tempted to do in some lifetimes is I might dab my soldering iron on the end of there and be tempted just to solder the wire down to the actual crimp, because the crimp is oversized for the wire. But the risk you run of doing that is that you put so much heat into the crimp that it melts back the wire. There's so much thermal mass in the actual metal that even if you're quick with your soldering iron, it tends to get red hot, and then it melts the insulation on the wire, and then it just makes a dog's dinner of it. So I'm afraid that's what we've got. So what I'll do now is I'll make up the rest of these. You don't have to watch me do that, and then we'll come back when we've done that. This is one of them little jobs. I guess it's like people who go fly fishing and they sit there tying the flies. It's just quite a nice little relaxing job, this, where you just get swept away in the task at hand and your brain almost goes into this REM sleep mode. I quite like doing jobs like this. I spend so much time at work where basically everything's a problem. By the time it gets to me, it's always a big problem. So, my day from the morning I get into work till the minute I get home at night, it's just one problem and one disaster after another, I'm afraid, because that's just the way it seems to work. So to actually just come and do something, some precious time in the lab, just doing something mundane like this, it's just massively therapeutic, and it's just really enjoyable just to be doing some craft. Because I always say, on this channel, again, a few of my subscribers have said, Chris, you're rubbish at electronics. And yeah, you're right, I am probably rubbish at electronics, don't know that much. But, God, it's a real therapy just to spend a bit of time in the workshop and, do something with your hands as opposed to just shuffling bits of paper around, which is what I spend 99% of my day doing now. So going back to this steel-coated wire that we've seemed to have here, I guess what I would say is if you've got any of this type of cabling which is used for grabber probes, go and put a magnet against it, because I guess what I'm actually asking you for is if you've got some that are actually made out of copper, good quality, would you let me know, because I could do with obviously making some new grabber probes in the future that are made out of decent quality copper. I mean, I suspect that the actual wire that they use on, good quality logic analyzers, it's really beautiful. It's kind of a work of art. It's very tough and no doubt very expensive and probably custom made. It's not the kind of thing you can probably buy off the high street. And I'd probably have to buy a 100-metre reel of it, which would cost me a fortune. So I could do with finding some nice cable to make some of these grabber probes out of. I'm guessing I might be able to afford to buy, one reel of fine cable, but I'm guessing I couldn't afford to buy all the different reels, the different colours. So we'd just have to make them all the same colour, or maybe put some heat shrink on them to actually just give them a little bit of a colour. But I suspect even buying all those different packets of coloured heat shrink would cost me a fortune as well. It's funny, I bitch and moan about buying bits of copper wire and stuff like that. I'm quite happy to go and spend a few £100 on some crap old logic analyzer that probably doesn't work, but I bitch and moan when it comes to buying bits of wire and stuff like that. I think the reason it comes back to is, when I did used to work in electronics, you didn't buy anything, you just went to the storeman and said, can I have some of this? I'm doing something at home, and I guess the amount of thievery that goes on in any electronics companies is huge. I just looked at it as it was a perk of the job. Oh, made a bit of a cock of that one. Let's see if I can salvage it. Can I pull the wire back? Gonna have another go at that. Just made a mess of that one. That's what talking and filming does. Right, so we've crimped all our steel wires on now, and yeah, they're not perfect. I know I've said about 3 times. The crimps are actually a little bit too big for the wire, but I think they'll be okay. I've done a quick continuity test on them all, and we are getting continuity from one end to the other. So yeah, so far so good. So this is the connector I'm going to use to interface to the pods on the logic analyzer, and the standard Molex connector has got these little barbs on it which are designed to, well, they're designed to actually both guide and they actually clip into the male part of the header that sits on the PCB. But these parts here, these are no good for plugging into the logic probe because it makes this piece of plastic too wide, so we're just going to cut these off. You can see this ending in tears, can't you? So this is the one that I made previously, and how many ways is it? This one is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 way, and I think this is a 12. Well, yeah, this is a 12, I remember. So we've just got to cut one of the ways off, which we will do. Cut that one off, and just tidy that up. I hope you guys aren't squeamish at the sight of blood. Do we have a doctor in the house? And I seem to remember it just helps slightly, just to chamfer the edges of these. It just helps them slide into the pod. So I'm just going to take the kind of the sharp edges of the plastic off, just put a little radius on them. Doesn't have to be much. Right, I think we can get rid of that horrible cutting board, can't we now? That was blinding, that, wasn't it? And even I couldn't see. So we just need to copy this one. Now, annoyingly, it looks like I don't have a black wire there, which I think is we use for bit 1. I seem to think that the white wire was... well, let me just explain what I did for the wire colouring. These wire colours are obviously kind of following the standard resistor colour codes of the black, brown, red, orange, yellow, etc, etc, etc. And the choice I made was, on a logic analyzer, because it's dealing with data and computer people are just odd, rather than starting at 1, they start at 0. So I thought it would be a good idea to have the first wire, which is data bit 0, as black, because obviously black is 0 for a resistor colour code and stuff like that, and then brown for 1, red for 2, orange for 3, as etc, going all the way up. But the only annoying thing is I often like to use a black wire for ground, so it just means up that the white wire 9 here at the end is actually going to be our ground connection. But from what I've seen using some other even kind of proprietary logic analyzers, it's not unusual to use a white wire for the ground connection. So we're going to do that. I suppose again I could have put some heat shrink round it to try and identify it as being a ground. What I have done is just put a little bit of a blue marker on here. I could probably do what they do on speaker wire and draw a line down it or something, just so I know. But there's only me using it. And the other thing is, if you actually look at the probe that this fits into, sorry, not the probe, the pod. The pod's got the numbers on it and a little label telling you what all these things are for. So yeah, all we need to do now is stick these on here. But annoyingly, I'm missing a black wire, so we might have to go in search for a piece of black wire. Yeah, it seems to be. I've got another of those cables here, but it just seems to be missing the black, so I don't know what's going on there. So we're missing a black, so we'll have to start with our brown. That clicks in nicely. You really want to get these right, because if you get them wrong, the buggers to get out. There's kind of like a little piece of bent up steel you have to push down to actually get them out. It's a little barb that stops them from slipping out, like a barb on a fish hook. Once it's in, it's in. And yeah, if you make a mistake after inserting these into the header, they can be really awkward to get out. I mean, you can get them out, but you usually end up kind of damaging the barb, and they never fit properly when you put them back in, which is annoying. So yeah, as I'm talking away, I'm bound to get one wrong. No, it's funny, when I used to work in electronics, you know, resistor colour codes and stuff like that, you didn't actually have to, it's like Morse code. After a while, when you do Morse code, you don't actually have to bother thinking about the dots and dashes anymore. You stop thinking about the letters totally. What you start to do is just recognise patterns. So it was very much the same when, you know, when I used to do more electronics. You wouldn't have to look at a resistor to know, you know, you wouldn't have to read the colour bars on it to know what it was. You'd just look at it and you'd immediately know it was 1K, 10K, 100K, 22K. You would just know. That was, you know, the experience thing. But now, because I do such little electronics, I even forgot, you know, sometimes I have to go through the colour codes in my head just to remember, you know, oh, what's blue? Oh, I don't remember. God. Don't know if any of you guys have that problem, but yeah, I'm afraid I admit to it. Don't think that one fully went in. I didn't feel that one click. Just need to push that in a bit further. Need a poking stick. Yeah, that clicked in there. It's yellow, green. And I don't know if you can hear, when you actually push these in, they do actually go in with a little click. But I will bring you in, hold this up. You'll maybe be able to hear it through the microphone on me. Hopefully you heard that click in. So that's my two sets of probes. So I can probe. What is it there? I don't know. There's 1, 2. So basically, I've got two sets of 8 data lines there. So I can probe 16 bits worth of data now, and we built these to use with the 6031D logic analyzer from HP. And I haven't had time to do a review on that yet, or really show it you properly. I know I gave you a teaser video, which I guess was really quite cruel. I've teased you all and got you all suitably excited, and then I've gone and made myself a cup of tea. So yeah, we'll be doing a video on them going forward. I just haven't had a lot of time recently, and I'm afraid everything's a bit rushed at the moment, because I think I said earlier I'm just busy with work and haven't had time to make longer videos. So for today, I think that'll do. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.